When an emotional war veteran took the stage at a charity gala, no one expected his words to leave NFL star Travis Kelce speechless. But when he revealed a long-lost letter that changed his life, the entire room was brought to tears, especially Kelce. What was in that letter? And why did it shake him to his core? Stay tuned for the incredible moment that no one saw coming. The hum of conversation filled the grand ballroom, a symphony of clinking glasses, soft laughter, and the distant melody of a live band playing in the corner. Golden chandeliers cast a warm glow over the room, illuminating elegantly dressed guests who had gathered for a noble cause, a charity gala dedicated to honoring war veterans. Among the attendees was Travis Kelce, the charismatic NFL superstar. Normally, the life of any event, Kelce carried himself with his usual charm, flashing smiles as he shook hands with fellow athletes and military officials. Yet, tonight felt different. There was something heavier in the air, an underlying sense of reverence that silenced even the loudest personalities in the room. A hush suddenly swept over the ballroom as the night's keynote speaker was introduced. The host's voice resonated through the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sergeant James Carter, a decorated war veteran with a story that will remind us all why we are here tonight." The crowd erupted into applause as an older man, his posture proud despite the cane in his hand, made his way onto the stage. The scars on his face told a story of battles fought, both overseas and within himself. Travis leaned forward, listening intently. He had met many veterans before, but something about James felt different. The veteran took a deep breath, scanning the crowd before speaking. "Years ago, I was a soldier in Afghanistan, fighting battles that weren't just on the battlefield, but also in my mind. When I returned home, I had nothing. No family waiting for me, no job, no sense of purpose. I was lost." A weighted silence hung over the room. Some guests looked down, others wiped at their eyes. Kelce shifted in his seat, feeling a familiar knot in his throat. Then, James continued, his voice thick with emotion. "One night, when I was at my lowest, I received a letter. A handwritten letter from a football player I had never met. It said, 'Even the strongest warriors need a team to lift them up. Keep fighting. You're not alone.'" Kelce's heart stopped. Something inside him stirred, memories rushing back. James smiled through misty eyes. "That letter saved my life. And tonight, I finally get to thank the man who wrote it." He turned toward Travis Kelce. The entire ballroom fell into stunned silence. The microphone let out a faint hum as Sergeant James Carter gripped the podium, his weathered hands steady despite the weight of the moment. The grand ballroom, once alive with laughter and clinking glasses, now stood in a heavy, anticipatory silence. The charity gala, meant to celebrate and uplift veterans, had suddenly shifted into something deeper, something raw. Travis Kelce, known for his larger-than-life personality and infectious energy, leaned forward slightly in his seat. Something about the veteran's presence commanded attention. James cleared his throat, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "War takes more than just lives," he began. "It takes time. It takes peace. And if you let it, it can take the parts of you that make life worth living." A hush settled over the room. Some guests wiped their eyes, others held their breath. I left for my last deployment with everything. A wife who loved me, a home I worked hard to build, a future I was proud of. When I came back, he exhaled, his jaw tightening for just a second, before forcing a small, pained smile. I had none of it. A sharp pang of empathy hit Kelce. He had seen stories like this before, but he had never heard one told like this. Up close, personal, devastatingly real. James continued, his words deliberate. PTSD doesn't just haunt you in nightmares. It follows you in the daylight, in the grocery store, in the moments that should be happy, but don't feel like anything at all. The silence was deafening now. My wife couldn't handle the ghost I had become. She left. My job didn't need a broken soldier. I lost it. And one night, sitting in a dark room, staring at an empty bottle, I decided maybe the world didn't need me either. Kelce felt his heart pound. He clenched his jaw, blinking hard. James took a breath. Then his voice softened. And then a letter came. Kelce froze. A letter from a football player I had never met. The veteran lifted his gaze directly at Travis. A letter from you. A sharp inhale spread across the room. Travis Kelce's eyes widened. His entire world had just shifted. The air in the grand ballroom felt heavy, charged with an emotion no one had expected. Travis Kelce, usually the light-hearted star of any room, now sat frozen, his chest tightening as Sergeant James Carter's words echoed in his ears. A letter from you. A ripple of sharp gasps swept through the audience. Heads turned toward Kelce, eyes wide with disbelief. He blinked, caught off guard. A letter? He had no idea. James took a breath, gripping the podium a little tighter. His voice carried the weight of years spent in the shadows of war. I was ready to give up that night, he admitted, his voice raw. Sitting alone in that tiny hospital room, feeling like the world had forgotten me. Then the nurse handed me an envelope. She said it came from someone in the NFL who wanted to remind veterans they weren't alone. Kelce's heartbeat quickened. He remembered now. Years ago, he had participated in an NFL outreach program for soldiers. He had spent hours writing letters, hoping, praying that somehow his words would reach someone who needed them. But he never expected to hear this. I opened it, expecting another formal, generic letter, James continued, his voice trembling. But instead, I saw handwriting. Real words. A message from a stranger who didn't know me, but still believed in me. The room was dead silent. No clinking glasses, no murmurs, just the weight of that moment pressing down on everyone. James reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a worn, creased envelope. The ink had faded, but the name signed at the bottom was unmistakable. It said, "Even the strongest warriors need a team to lift them up. Keep fighting. You're not alone." Kelce swallowed hard, his throat tight. He had written those exact words, but never knew if they made a difference. Now, standing before him, was the proof. James looked up, eyes filled with gratitude. You saved my life, Travis. Kelce, overwhelmed, covered his face with one hand. For the first time in his career, he had no words, only tears. The ballroom was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of anticipation in the air. Travis Kelce, still grappling with the weight of James Carter's words, felt his chest tighten. The war veteran stood before him, a man who had been on the edge of giving up, only to find strength in a letter Travis had written years ago. James took a slow, deep breath, his fingers trembling slightly as he reached for a weathered guitar resting on a stand beside him. "I never got to thank the man who saved my life," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "So, I wrote this song for him." A ripple of movement passed through the crowd. People shifted in their seats, their eyes locked on the stage. A few reached for napkins, already sensing the flood of emotions about to hit. James strummed the first chord, his voice raw but steady. The lyrics told a story of brotherhood, of battles fought in silence, of finding hope in the unlikeliest of places. Travis felt something deep inside him crack. His eyes burned as he wiped his face, overwhelmed. This was more than a song. This was survival. As James played the final note, a single tear slipped down Kelce's cheek. He wasn't alone, and neither was James. The entire room rose to their feet, applauding, no, celebrating, a moment that would be remembered forever. As the last chord of the song faded, the silence in the grand ballroom was almost deafening. Travis Kelce sat motionless, his normally confident demeanor replaced with something far more vulnerable. His chest rose and fell with deep, measured breaths, his eyes red-rimmed. Then, without hesitation, he stood. The crowd watched in stunned anticipation as Kelce slowly walked toward the stage. James Carter, still gripping his guitar, looked up, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. Kelce didn't say a word at first. Instead, he reached out and pulled James into a firm, unshakable embrace. The moment stretched, heavy with emotion. Two men, one a warrior of the field, the other a warrior of the battlefield, bound by an unexpected connection. Finally, Kelce pulled back, turned to the microphone, and exhaled. The weight of the moment pressed on his shoulders, but he carried it with quiet strength. "You saved yourself," he said, his voice thick. "I just reminded you that you weren't alone." A beat of silence. Then, the entire room erupted. The audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some openly wiping away tears. It wasn't just applause, it was acknowledgement. James nodded, his smile trembling but strong. He had once felt invisible, forgotten, but not tonight. Tonight, he was seen. And in that moment, both men realized something powerful. Kindness, even in its smallest form, could change the course of a life. The moment hung in the air, charged with raw emotion. Travis Kelce, a man celebrated for his strength on the field, now stood exposed in the most human way possible. Across from him, Sergeant James Carter wiped his eyes, his voice still trembling from the song that had laid his soul bare. Then, something unexpected happened. Kelce reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. The room collectively held its breath. "I wrote that letter years ago," Kelce said, unfolding it carefully. "I never knew if it reached anyone. But you kept it." James nodded, his voice thick. "It saved me." The weight of those words settled over the audience. This was bigger than football, bigger than war. It was proof that even the smallest act of kindness, a single letter, could pull someone back from the edge. The applause that followed was deafening, but it wasn't just for Kelce or James. It was for every veteran who had ever felt forgotten. That night, the charity gala's donations shattered all previous records. The story went viral, reminding the world that one act of kindness could echo for a lifetime. Have you ever witnessed how a small act of kindness changed someone's life? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more inspiring real-life stories.